Unit 4 Plants. Chapter 4.1 Manufacturing in Green Plants. By the end of this section, you should be able to define photosynthesis as the production of food by leaves using sunlight, water and chlorophyll, give a summary of the equation of photosynthesis, explain the major events in the process of photosynthesis, and confirm that plants produce food by photosynthesis by conducting a simple experiment. Did you know? A very small proportion of sunlight energy is trapped and transformed by the chlorophyll of plants and algae during the process of photosynthesis. And you're going to learn more about the process of photosynthesis in this chapter. Alright, let's go to photosynthesis now. This is a really important component in biology, and it's reasonably simple for you guys, but there's a few important parts that's really important to understand. So first of all, it's the sunlight that's the original source of the energy, and you've got green pigments in the leaves of plants and also algae. And basically what happens is the plants will absorb the energy from the sunlight, and they'll use it and convert it into sugars. But they also need carbon dioxide from the air in order to do that, and water from the soil. So we can define photosynthesis as the process of food making using sunlight energy, water, carbon dioxide, and chlorophyll. This is the green pigment that's within the leaves, and it's where the photosynthesis happens. Oxygen is the byproduct, and it's what created by plants, and this whole process is the fundamental principle why life is able to exist on Earth. Okay, let's go a little bit deeper now and let's look at photosynthesis. This is a cross-section of a leaf. So you've got the internal parts here, which is like where the air can come into, and photosynthesis takes place in this upper epidermis and mesophyll layer. The epidermis is mainly for protection of the leaves, and this is the upper part is where most of the chloroplasts are, because the sunlight's coming in from the top here, and the idea of the leaf is to capture that. Just a few more parts about this. You've got something here called the stoma and guard cell. This is what opens and closes to allow oxygen to go into, or rather out of the plant, and carbon dioxide to diffuse into the plant. And this is where the photosynthesis takes place. So these things open up during the night and close up during the day because they don't want too much water to leave the plant. It's time for a few key terms. First one is photosynthesis, and you can define by its being the process by which green plants use sunlight to synthesize sugars from carbon dioxide and water. Photosynthetic organisms are things like plants or algae, and they're able to have the ability to carry out the process of photosynthesis. So things like animals and insects cannot photosynthesize. They're not photosynthetic organisms. They have to be plants or algae to do that. A tree is a woody perennial plant, typically with a single stem, growing to a considerable height and bearing lateral branches. An algae is a photosynthesizing unicellular organism. This here is a summary of the equation for photosynthesis, and it is really useful to just understand what's going on here. Let's break it down. First of all, we've got here carbon dioxide, which is the gas that we breathe out. It's part of the atmosphere and the air that we've got, and it goes into the leaves, and water is also required in this reaction, and it occurs in the leaves where the chlorophyll is the pigment within the chloroplast within the leaves that this whole process happens. So we're in the leaves, we've got carbon dioxide coming in, we've got water there as well, and what's being produced is sugar. So when we're talking about sugar, we're talking about the useful type of energy that can be used within the plant, and some plants also store it. And then the byproduct of this reaction is oxygen. So oxygen is produced. Oxygen is obviously what we breathe in, and without plants we wouldn't have any in the atmosphere. So a few key points to take home here. It takes place, of course, in the leaves and requires chloroplasts. That's what's in this upper layer here. And it occurs where most concentrations of these organelles are the highest, in this area. Okay, it's time for a few key terms. The first one is chloroplast. These are those subcellular structures that are found in cells and where the chlorophyll pigments are located and are organized. There's also the chlorophyll, which is the green pigment which is responsible for the absorption of the light that goes into the plants to provide energy for photosynthesis. A couple more. Mesophyll, this is the tissue in the internal part of the leaf that contains a large number of chloroplasts. You got the stomata, they're those tiny pores that allow gas to come in and out. Did you know that the oxygen that we breathe comes as a byproduct of the photosynthesis from H2O molecules? Yes, that is what plants do when they do photosynthesis. They're using H2O, the water, and they are using carbon dioxide to create oxygen, as well as sugars. Here is a video that goes into an introduction about photosynthesis into more detail.
In the world, all living things are either heterotrophs or autotrophs. Hetero means other, and troph means food. So heterotrophs must eat other food for energy. So rat might eat plants, seeds, and insects, and you may eat carrots or hamburgers or ice cream. But your body needs to consume food for energy. You can't just create energy out of thin air. No, that's a trick for the autotrophs. Auto means self, and troph again means food, so autotrophs can make their own food. This doesn't mean that plants can cook. It means that they can take water and carbon dioxide and the energy from sunlight and create sugars for themselves. And then heterotrophs take advantage of that and eat the plants and get the sugars for themselves. Autotrophs use a process called photosynthesis to create energy molecules from water, carbon dioxide, and sunlight. For every 6 water molecules and 6 carbon dioxide molecules and the energy from the sun, plants can create 1 glucose molecule, or C6H12O6, and release 6 oxygen molecules. Those oxygen molecules are also really useful to life on Earth because so many creatures, including you and me, use it for respiration.
Activity 4.1. In this activity, you're going to test for starch. So starch is the sugars that are the way that plants store sugars, and they can be found in green leaves. And in this activity, you are going to use some boxes, plants, Bunsen burners, ethanol, beakers, water, iodine solution, forceps, as well as some petri dishes to test for starch, and you're going to follow the procedure outlined here below. Glucose is the sugar, and it's formed when light is absorbed and used to generate energy, which is used to convert CO2 into glucose in the splitting of water molecules. So this is part of the photosynthesis equation, and the water is split there with the light energy. Oxygen is formed, and you've got here the 2 hydrogen elements as well. Activity 4.2. In this discussion, you are going to have a chat about why plants store glucose in the form of starch, and then you are going to discuss this within groups. Why starch rather than glucose? That's what you need to find out. Did you know the huge mass of the plant, think up of a huge plant, is made up of organic compounds which is formed from carbon of atmospheric CO2? Yes, all of this stuff, what you consider a plant, is actually made up of carbon from carbon dioxide. It's absorbed it as it's grown and stored it into the actual plant matter of that particular plant. Here's a video that talks about that exact thing. Where do plants get their mass?
Now, I think it's intuitive to believe that the tree gets most of its mass from the soil, because you can see those roots digging into the soil and they must be taking something out of there. And I mean, a tree looks like dirt and it feels solid like dirt. But it's not. In the early 1600s, a scientist named Johann Baptista van Helmont tried to figure out where the mass of a tree was coming from. So he got a pot of soil and very carefully measured the amount of soil in there. Then he planted the tree and took care of it for 5 years, making sure that no soil left or was added to his pot. And at the end of this experiment, he weighed the tree to find that it was 72 kilograms, but the mass of soil had only decreased by about 60 grams. This was pretty strong evidence that the mass of the tree does not come from the soil.
Confirming photosynthesis. So this relates to the activity that you guys did. Glucose is stored temporarily in leaves, some of the parts, and you can test for that. And starch indicates that photosynthesis is occurring. If there's no starch, then photosynthesis must not be occurring. In a variegated leaf, there is reduced or lack completely of the green pigment in some of its parts, and you can test for that in this activity, 4.3. By using some variegated leaves and some iodine solution, in groups you can test for starch and the presence of photosynthesis. Oxygen is the byproduct and can be measured by observing bubbles given off by pondweed. It's another activity where we can look at the bubbles, the CO, the oxygen coming out of the plants. And we're doing this with some pondweed, with some sun, and here's the activity that you're going to run through to test that. Activity 4.5, analyzing the effect of light intensity on the rate of photosynthesis. And in this activity, you're going to be counting the bubbles with different sized light bulbs at different distances away from the algae. It's time for a few review questions now. Photosynthesis is a process A, done by some plants and algae, B, done by few plants, C, done by all plants, D, that can be done in the absence of light. And the correct answer is C. Photosynthesis is done by all plants. Question 2. One of the following is a raw material for photosynthesis. Is that A, oxygen, B, water, C, sunlight, or D, chlorophyll? And the correct answer is B, water. Question 3. One of the following is the immediate product of photosynthesis. Is it A, CO2, B, starch, C, glucose, or D, protein? And the correct answer is B, starch. Question 4. Variegated leaves are leaves A, that contain chlorophyll all over there, B, with less number of stomata, C, with reduced amount of chlorophyll in some of their parts, or D, they cannot carry out photosynthesis at all. And the correct answer is C, with reduced amount of chlorophyll in some of their parts. Question 5. Sunlight is A, raw material for photosynthesis, B, an energy used to power the process of photosynthesis, C, a product of photosynthesis, or D, none of the above. And the correct answer is B, an energy used to power the process of photosynthesis. Question 6. Oh, there is only five questions in this one, so we'll wrap that up and move on to the next part of this chapter. Thanks for listening. Stem, and they're generally a lot longer lived than other plants. So here's a video that goes into a bit more detail about what exactly is a tree, and it's by the Harvard Museum of Natural History. It's quite a good little video.
Always been fascinated by trees and the ecosystems that surround them. Let's take a short tour of a tree. We can start by asking a simple question. What is a tree? A tree is a woody plant characterized by a single dominant stem, called a trunk. Many smaller woody branches that emerge from the trunk carry the leafy foliage of the tree. At the base, the tree is anchored by roots that flare downward and outward into the ground. Trees are critical players in forest ecosystems the world over. But how do they work? Leaves are the sugar-making factories that supply the tree with energy. The process of making sugars, called photosynthesis, requires sunlight. So the leaves are concentrated high up on the tree where light is abundant. To understand how leaves work, let's look inside. An outer layer of cells, the epidermis, covers the leaf.
Alright, photosynthesis is something that we have talked about already. But just a little reminder, this takes place in leaves. It's where the chloroplasts are, and we won't go into too much more detail because that's something you've already learnt. But did you know that trees form a forest ecosystem? Look at this beautiful place. And there's a lot of different animals, different plants here, and also microbes living in it. And they all form that ecosystem. And later on, I think it's Unit 6, we're going to go into what an ecosystem is. Alright, it's time for a few key terms now. Greenhouse. So a greenhouse is a glass building that plants are protected in while they're growing. Germination is the process of growing a shoot and a root from the seed. Sprouting is producing a shoot. Thinning is reducing the member of seedling in order to improve the growth of those remaining. So, what are the steps of growing trees? Well, you can be grown, the trees can be grown from seeds or seedlings, which are small versions of the plant. Seeds have different requirements, so let's just talk about a few of those. They need to be covered in plastic or put in the shade, and kept in a warm area with good light. Gradually move them. And it's important to keep the soil moistened, as well as protect them from getting stepped on or eaten. Did you know that always you need to water plants thoroughly before any thinning, repotting, or transplanting? And handle seedlings by their leaves, never by their stems. Alright, in this activity you are going to have a little discussion about how to grow trees. In groups, discuss the main steps and consider if there's any possibility of growing trees rather than directly from seeds. Alright, so here's a figure that shows just how to prepare holes for developing trees and the root ball. So what we've got here to start off with is a hole that's dug in the soil. And you can see a saucer-shaped dig that's about 3 times larger than the root diameter. Next step to planting a tree is you basically put the root ball into the hole. And finally, you want to fill the soil around to the approximate level of the soil fill. And this is usually about 3 to 5 centimeters below the root ball, but be careful not to cover the top of the root ball. Okay, in activity 4.7, you're going to develop seedlings for Wanza. So I want you to interview an agricultural extension worker and find out the necessary steps required for developing seedlings for Wanza, Cordia africana, and find out how the seedlings are transferred to their permanent site. Alright, let's talk about forests in Ethiopia now. So, there used to be about 30% forest in the 1900s. But what happened? Well, there was a lot of clearing for agriculture. You can see here transportation, cutting down trees for timber, and now there's only about 4% of what there used to be. Their forests were sparse and just covered so much area. But eventually people realized that there's not a lot left. So they started a reforestation programs, and they've been a huge success. And this video goes into detail about just how Ethiopia is tackling deforestation. Okay, it's time for another activity. This is activity 4.8. You'll be researching on areas of forest cover in Ethiopia in 1900s and now. So in groups, you go to the library and carry out research by making comparison between forest coverage of your country in 1900s to what it is now, and then present your findings to the class. Did you know that every 2 billion years or so, tons of topsoil is lost into the River Nile? Activity 4.9, Tree Growing Project. So in this exciting project, you are going to be designing how to grow indigenous trees at your locality or school compound. You may go and discuss how to get the necessary materials and support with your school administration and local representative office of the Ministry of Agriculture, but you are expected to do the following ahead of time. And I'll let you just take care to do these steps for this activity. Did you know that each of us inhales about 16 kilos of oxygen daily, which all comes from plants? Every day we need 7 trees to remove the carbon dioxide we breathe out and to give us back the oxygen we breathe in. Okay, here's an image of a few indigenous plants and trees of Ethiopia, and the indigenous just means that they are native and they are not introduced. They are adapted to the local soil and climate, and in this video it will go into 1 million trees for Ethiopia and about how indigenous trees have been planted on a conservation effort to improve the ecology of Ethiopia. Alright, so what are the benefits of growing indigenous trees? Well, there's a few big ones. The first is that they are adapted to the local conditions, and that just means they're going to grow better and they're going to fit in well. And the trees provide different benefits for the local people, and some of these benefits are as shown here: building materials, firewood and charcoal, medicine, shade, fruits, fodder, and so on. Okay, let's just do some review questions on this one, and then we'll move on to the chapter review and we'll do some test questions. But first, some little quiz here. Question 1. A tree is characterized as A, small and soft woody plant, B, large and soft woody plant, C, small and annual plant, or D, large and perennial plant. And the correct answer is B, large and soft woody plant. Question 2. One of the following is not included among the stages of developing tree. Is it A, seed, B, seedling, C, young plant, or D, grown up flowering plant? And the correct answer is C, young plant. Question 3. A small and fully developed plant. A seedling is A, a small and fully developing plant, B, a baby plant, C, grown up flowering plant, or D, large annual plant. And the correct answer is B, a baby plant. Question 4. One of the following is not included among care for a seedling. Is it A, providing shade, B, watering, C, cutting, or D, none of the above? And the correct answer is C, cutting. Question 5. One of the following is not an indigenous plant. Is it A, chat, B, eucalyptus, C, zigba, or D, walker? And the correct answer is B, eucalyptus. And that concludes the questions for this section. We'll now move on to a chapter review and then proceed to chapter review questions. We're going to just do a quick summary of the key points from this chapter and then move on to some review questions. So let's just jump straight into it. Photosynthesis. This is the process that the light energy from the sun is absorbed by the green pigments of plants and algae, and it's the chlorophyll within the leaves that's used to make sugars. And that's what photosynthesis is all about. It takes place primarily in plant leaves, but also occurs in algae. And plant cells absorb the sunlight and use it to convert carbon dioxide, what we breathe out, and water, what they absorb from the soil, into sugars, and that is what they use for food, and also is the basis of the food web, as we're going to learn more about when we do ecosystems. During photosynthesis, the carbon dioxide from the atmosphere is used to make the organic molecule of the cell in the form of glucose, which is what we consider sugar. The glucose formed in the leaf cells is temporarily stored in the form of starch, and the presence of starch indicates that the process of photosynthesis has taken place in leaf cells. During plant photosynthesis, oxygen is evolved and as a byproduct, and a tree is defined as a large, perennial woody plant. Trees are an important part of the natural landscape of any country, and in Ethiopia particularly, they're very important. For instance, in agriculture, shade, fences, timber, firewood, supplying fruit crops, and traditional medicines. The basic parts of a tree are the roots, trunk, branches, twigs, and also the leaves. Generally, the life cycles of trees are divided into different stages in forestry. Seeds or seedlings are used to grow trees, and it's necessary to care for the baby plants until they establish themselves as trees in their permanent sites. Due to clearing of land for agriculture, cutting down trees has led to Ethiopia's forests being reduced to only about 4% of what they used to be. But they are planting trees around Ethiopia, especially indigenous ones, to help revitalize these areas. Growing indigenous plants is the most important practice to any given area because they are adapted to that area. Alright, it's review question time. What are the stomata? This is question 1. Are they A, the pores in the plant cells? Are they B, pores on the leaves of a plant? C, photosynthetic sites? Or D, none of the above? And the correct answer is B, pores on the leaves of a plant. Question 2. The use of CO2 during the process of photosynthesis is for A, the formation of O2, B, the absorption of light, C, the formation of organic compound, or D, respiration. And the correct answer is C, the formation of organic compound. Question 3. Blue-black coloration on leaves during tests for photosynthesis is A, conformation of release of O2, B, conformation of carbohydrate formation, C, conformation of the formation of water molecules, or D, none of the above. And the correct answer is B, conformation of carbohydrate formation. Question 4. One of the following is not included in the summary equation of photosynthesis. Is it A, CO2, B, H2O, C, O2, or D, darkness? And the correct answer is D, darkness. Question 5. One of the following is true about the test of formation of O2 as a byproduct during photosynthesis. Is it A, blue-black coloration of leaves, B, keeping plants in complete darkness results in no blue-black coloration, C, keeping pondweed in inverted funnel and the release of air bubble, or D, none of the above? And the correct answer is C, keeping pondweed in inverted funnel and the release of air bubble. Question 6. One of the following is not included among the list of importance of trees to the environment. Is it A, providing shade, B, providing firewood, C, absorbing CO2 from the environment, or D, causing erosion? And the correct answer is D, causing erosion. Question 7. The first step in tree growing project is A, planting trees, B, transferring the seedlings, C, giving care to seedlings, D, identifying the purpose. And the correct answer is D, identifying the purpose. Question 8. Deforestation is A, clearing forests for timber, B, cutting trees for agriculture, C, cutting trees for construction, or D, all of the above? And the correct answer is D, all of the above. Question 9. Care for a tree is A, cutting, B, pruning, C, removing leaves, or D, not given? And the correct answer is B, pruning. Question 10. An indigenous tree is A, a tree introduced from outside of locality, B, a tree not adapted to a given locality, C, a tree known growing at a given locality, or D, an exotic tree? And the correct answer is C, a tree known for growing at a given locality. And that concludes the review questions for this chapter.